Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to this morning's BCP Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Kelsey and I'll be chairing this meeting this morning. We also have lots of other councillors with us today and I will quickly run through them. We have Councillor Toby Johnson, the Vice Chairman, Councillor Steve Barron, Councillor Derek Borthwick, Councillor Mike Brooke, Councillor Simon Bull, Councillor Paul Hilliard, Councillor Bob Lawson, Councillor Tony O'Neill, Councillor Felicity Rice and Councillor Tony Trent. And the first thing I will do this morning is pass through Democratic Services to go through housekeeping. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Planning Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. Please use the microphones on your desk when speaking and please remember to turn them off when you are finished. If accessing the meeting via Microsoft Teams, please turn on your video function when invited to speak. Again, if you are accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please do so by using the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. When voting on a move, the Chairman will call out each committee member's name in roll call style and will ask the member to respond with a vote for, against or abstain. For those in the room, if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point under the Brady Road flyover. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. This includes members' laptops. Please turn off laptop cameras and phones, microphones, and turn the volume all the way down to ensure there is no disruption or feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Do we have any apologies, please, Jill?
We do. We have apologies from Councillor Marion Lepedevin, Councillor George Farquhar, Councillor Simon McCormack, Councillor Peter Hall and Councillor Malcolm Davies.
And substitute members?
Councillor Mike Brooke is here today for Councillor Lepedevin.
Thank you, Jill. Members, do we have any declarations of interest on any items on today's agenda, please? Councillor Barron?
Thank you, Chairman. In my lead member role, I've had discussions with Historic England and this is item 5A, Chairman, various other interested parties, so I feel it wouldn't be appropriate for me to vote on the item. However, if it's okay with you, if I could say a few words regarding it.
That's fine.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yep, thank you. So moving on, public issues, we will have presentations by different officers this morning. We have a selection of officers working away in the background with us, including Mr. Perrins to my right here. We also have Mr. Firth, who is the legal representative and will join us online. We have a schedule of planning applications for this morning. There are 2 applications to consider today. And the first of those is at 13 to 15 the High Street in Poole. And I would ask Hannah if you could present your case, please, Hannah.
Morning, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can.
Just set the presentation up. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yeah, that's all fine. Thanks, Hannah.
Right, I'll make a start.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. The application in front of you today is located at 13 High Street, Poole, and is the redevelopment of the site to form 40 apartments and 224 square metres of E-class space following the demolition of the current existing buildings. The application is located within Poole Town Centre Conservation Area on the south side of High Street and is locally known as the Dibbins site. The site has 2 frontages, one which runs along High Street and the other which is situated to the south, which borders Strand Street. Whereas High Street is largely commercial and retail units, Strand Street is largely residential, with apartments located directly to the south of the proposed development. The site is currently occupied by a 3-storey townhouse building and a single-storey former shop unit which fronts onto High Street. Both of these buildings are locally listed. In the centre of the site is a 2-storey former warehouse building, which runs parallel to High Street. The former Dibbins shop front on High Street can be seen here. The vehicle access to the site is also seen within this photograph, so that is just here. Number 15 High Street was demolished in the 1970s, and the land has stood vacant ever since. This has meant there's been a gap within the street scene for many years. This is the present day view down High Street, in which the site can be seen on the left. The storefronts are a key part of the conservation area and play a large role in keeping the area's unique character. The current site's vehicle access is off High Street between 12 and 13 High Street. Little activity is seen within the site. Within the site and in the centre is the former 2-storey warehouse. The land surrounding this is currently used for parking vehicles to do with the site's current use. This photo is also further into the site, and you can see the same applies. To the back of the site is the same again. The majority of the site is a car park used for the site's current purposes, and the site really lacks any activity. The proposals seek to inject new life into locally listed buildings, and alongside the new development. The design approach proposed is considered to take a sensitive approach to the site, representative of its location in the old town of Poole within the conservation area. PP30 requires the development to project and enhance the heritage assets in the conservation area. It is recognised that the design approach will have positive heritage benefits arising from the installment of the historic form of High Street, by filling in the gap that is left by number 15, along with an overall sensitive design approach. The site is currently listed upon Heritage England's at-risk register. The Heritage at-risk register helps to understand the overall state of England's historic sites. The programme identifies those sites that are most at risk of being lost as a result to neglect, decay, or inappropriate development. It is acknowledged that the Council's Conservation Officer objects to the proposals as it would give rise, in their view, to lessen substantial harm. As required by the MPPF, consideration should be given to whether there are public benefits that exist that would override the less than substantial harm. In this case, the public benefits of delivering residential development in the context where there is a housing land supply shortage in Poole, and the inclusion of new retail floor space in a key shopping part of the town is considered to outweigh any less than substantial harm identified. Through further consultation with Historic England regarding the development, they have stated that overall they are happy with the proposed development, the aspects of the historic site which are being retained, as well as the modern elements of the scheme. Historic England have asked for conditions to be attached to the approval to clarify the extent of the demolition, the structural capability of the stable to support a roof extension, to guarantee pedestrian access through the site, and to guarantee the quality of architectural design details and materials, all of which the applicant is happy to agree to. Nope. As stated, the proposals aim to provide 40 apartments and 424 square metres of E-class space. Following partial demolition of the existing buildings, the site plan shows the ground floor of the development, which contains the commercial and a number of residential units. The floors above this are purely residential. There is a range of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments proposed, which are deemed acceptable for the location of the development. The site is within the sustainable transport zone, therefore is policy compliant in providing no parking. The proposals do provide cycle parking for residents for the development. It should be noted that the scheme has dramatically changed through the application process, decreasing in height from 7 stories to 3.5. These changes have been proposed through consultee comments, as well as the applicant undertaking revisions suggested by the Conservation Consultee in the early stages of development. The location of the development is in Poole Town Centre Heritage Conservation Area and gives greater requirements to achieve excellent design, which is fitting with what can be seen currently in the conservation area. To the front of the development, the proposals would seek to keep the facade of number 13 and number 17 High Street. Both facades will be enhanced, however, key features of their design will be retained in keeping with the street scene currently seen on the High Street. Number 15 High Street was demolished in the 1970s, therefore a new building will be here to form a solid frontage along the scheme. The style of number 15 is in keeping with other elements that can be seen throughout the conservation area, however, with a modern twist. The street scene shows the proposed development of High Street. Materials proposed along High Street include timber windows and doors for the retail units, black aluminium critter windows, a mixture of red and brown bricks with soldier courses where appropriate, white render on 13 High Street's facade, clay and slate roof tiles, and the repair and restoration of the existing chimney, as well as pillars at the service points to the site. All elements of the design can be seen within the conservation area. The design of the proposed units bordering High Street are sympathetic to key features seen within the street scene and use materials that can be seen throughout the street and listed units, fitting in well with the conservation area and the buildings up and building upon a derelict unit. The street scene onto Strand Street shows standing stem zinc cladding will be used and brown multi-stock brick finish with a natural slate tile used for the roofing on the southern 2 buildings. The adjoining retail unit will use materials such as timber sash windows, burnt copper effect cladding, and plain clay tiles. All of the materials listed above are deemed acceptable. The materials are conditioned and should be submitted and approved prior to the commencement on site. The redevelopment seeks to retain a large proportion of the buildings on site, therefore managing to retain elements of architectural style throughout the buildings and, more importantly, retain the important heritage features these buildings provide in the conservation area. The scheme provides 0 affordable housing. A viability report has been submitted alongside the application, and having been reviewed by the district valuation team, it was confirmed the proposals were appropriate for the development. The district valuation team advised that the council should consider including an overage agreement within the Section 106 agreement to undertake a review of the scheme at an agreed point in the future to check whether any viability changes in the future warrant contributions to the affordable housing to be secured. Committee will note that this was agreed as an acceptable approach at the recent Key Thistle appeal, and members should consider whether they would want this approach to be included within the Section 106 should the scheme be approved. So just to conclude, the proposals introduced residential and retail use classes to the site. The applicant has stated that an end user of the retail units has already been established and is keen to commence business in the location. Therefore, there is significant economic benefits arising from the scheme, which is a considerable weight attached to the balancing exercise. Given the shortfall of number of homes within the local plan area, the balance is tilted in favour of sustainable development. The NPPF places great weight on the conservation of heritage assets, and the proposals would have less than substantial harm on the area. The environmental factors are therefore considered neutral. There is positive economic and social factors, and overall the scheme represents sustainable development. The scheme is considered to comply with the development plan as a whole and is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hannah. Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of requests to speak, we've had no requests in objection. Giles Moyer and Mr. Richardson are here to talk to you on behalf of the applicant.
Morning.
Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicants in support of this important proposal, which will help to rejuvenate Poole High Street and deliver a mixed-use scheme with shops and residential apartments on this key site. As we have seen from the brochure we provided, the applicant has been on a long journey with the site, reinforcing their desire to deliver a quality scheme that responds to and highlights the heritage assets within and surrounding the site. In January 2021, the applicant submitted a request for pre-application advice to the council and also met with Poole Keys Forum and Poole Bid, as they, the applicants, were keen to secure their feedback on the proposals. Subsequent meetings were held with Poole Keys Forum and Poole Bid in July 2021 before the formal submission of the application in August last year. The principal changes to the proposal have included the reduction in height of the new properties fronting Strand Street to 3.5 stories. These properties are reflective of Poole Quay in their appearance, being of a wharf-style design. The reduction in the height of the proposal is supported by Poole Keys Forum. The proposal has evolved from a desire to retain a historic warehouse within the centre of the site and to bring it into an active, everyday use. The layout of the proposal has responded to the historic context and provides the opportunity for pedestrian connectivity from the High Street through to Strand Street. These linkages reflect the historic arrangement of Poole Quay and provide public access across the site, something that doesn't currently exist. Within the site, the buildings are arranged around 2 courtyards. The courtyards will serve as a central open feature within the development, allowing the ground floor commercial units to spill out into what will become a vibrant space, complementing the High Street as a destination. And Paul Richardson will explain about the desires of the future occupiers. The proposal includes the repair and reinstatement of the historic wall along Strand Street, which will form the site's southern boundary. Despite the stated objection from the Council's Conservation Officer and the subsequent request by the Conservation Officer for Historic England to review the proposal, it's important to be aware of the detailed comments from Historic England and their support for the scheme. Historic England state in their detailed response, "We note that there are a number of heritage benefits associated with the proposals to balance against the minor harms of the conservation area. The reuse of a derelict site will enhance the vitality of the conservation area. The provision of courtyards and alleyways respond to the historic grain of the area. The applicants trust that the support from Historic England, being the nationally appointed body that looks after England's historic environment, will outweigh the minor harm that the Conservation Officer has identified, and that the heritage benefits the proposal deliver are realised." As you have seen from your officer report, the Environment Agency have confirmed the amendments to the scheme have addressed their concerns and they have removed their objection to the proposal. Details of servicing for the site show waste collection and delivery points have been submitted as part of the application. These details show that the site can be safely serviced, and it's reflected by the fact there's no objections being raised by Council's Transportation Officer or Waste and Recycling Officer. Dedicated and accessible cycle stores are provided for residents and for visitors. From the outset, the applicant has sought to work with the council and engage with local stakeholders to deliver a high quality development of the site, something that locals will be able to use and access and the applicant will be proud of. Overall, the proposal will deliver much needed housing in a sustainable location on a brownfield site that will provide significant heritage benefits to this historic part of Poole Quay, something that everybody will benefit from and will also safeguard the historic features of the site for future generations. The commercial elements of the scheme will deliver a vibrant destination, complementing the existing retail offer and opening the site up for public use. I trust you're able to support the application and approve it this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Matt. Thank you. This statement is read on behalf of Mr. Jake Cully, the UK Deus finance owner. Deus is an international destination and cultural brand that started in Sydney, Australia in 2006. With surfing and lifestyle as its brand identity, Deus has created a number of destinations around the world to include, but not limited to, South Africa, Bali, LA, Milan, and many more, to name a few. Deus creates a community-centred place in each of its locations that drive the immediate economy and encourage neighbouring businesses to develop. This has been evidenced in all of the destinations around the world, and in particular, Bali, Indonesia. As a brand, we are interested in the Poole Old Town to create our first UK flagship destination. The location that will be created offers a unique experience from other towns and cities such as London and Liverpool, which we have also inquired about. Our vision is to create a multi-purpose place that has our flagship store, cafes, tapas bars, event spaces, and much more. If successful, we'll be able to arrange a long-term agreement with the landowner ASAP and to start to create excitement for the destination across our many social media platforms and million-plus followers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have Ward Councillor with us this morning on this one. Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Yes, I was provided requirement because I was online here, and therefore it doesn't take account of what has just been said by the applicant. So, if the chairman might allow me, I to have a couple of words after the statement, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely fine, Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Also, if members have access to the pictures of the frontage, it might be useful to look at that while I'm speaking.
Yeah, Hannah, could you put those up, please?
Yep, I can share that again.
Thank you.
Okay. This site is of critical importance to the future of Poole's Old Town. The lower High Street, which it fronts, lacks vitality and looks poorly maintained due to its poor and unoccupied state. The wider area lacks a critical mass of independent retail. As a result, the Old Town lacks sustainability as a tourist, shopping and leisure destination. The site is unique as there are no other development sites likely to come forward in the area due to its dense historic infrastructure. It is therefore essential that any proposals for this site deliver high quality public realm and create viable retail units. Unfortunately, this scheme has developed in a haphazard way. It has changed out of all recognition from the plans presented in the design and access statement. Although many of the changes have been for the better, the applicant has not presented sufficient information to clearly articulate how the proposals will deliver an active and viable retail area in the courtyards. I fear the northeastern courtyard in particular will not be obvious enough to pedestrians in the high street to be viable. The proposed frontage to the high street is very depressing. Although the empty space needs to be filled, the proposal to build up on that plot and the adjacent two-storey building to the height of the existing historic three-storey buildings on both sides would be highly damaging to those buildings and the street scene. The eastern building, which appears to be Georgian, is a key feature in the high street, while the Victorian building on the other side is of interesting design. Infilling to the same height as these buildings would detract from their features. It would also detract from the character of the street, which is marked by subtle changes of height and roof profiles. The poor design of the infill, being generic and out of character, would increase the harm. The site is not subject to the contaminated land issues that many local development sites suffer from. Also, no expectations as to development scale were created in the local plan. Any concerns as to the viability of redevelopment can therefore only result from unrealistic expectations as to the value of the land. In summary, I believe the scheme will fail to deliver the design quality needed for this site and risks creating unviable units, so I believe it should be turned down. If the committee is minded to approve the scheme, however, I would request that a condition be introduced that residents will not be permitted to apply for Zone A parking permits. Currently, there are 285 Zone A spaces, but 467 permits in issue. Continuing to allow the issue of permits for occupiers of new developments would be unfair on existing permit holders. Thank you. So I'd just like to say, following the applicant's statement, that I welcome the fact that there is interest in the site. I'm still a bit unclear. I'm not familiar with the business model of the applicant, and it would have been good if it could have been printed to the public exactly how these buildings were going to be used, and that didn't happen because the scheme changed so much in its evolution. What I'm really concerned is that the use of the commercial units attracts people into the courtyards and adds viability to the broader area, and doesn't just fall back into perhaps being office space, which would have limited improvements. So in summary, I'd say I do well. It would be good if the committee could explore a bit more how the likely viability and how much animation there will be in those courtyards. But I retain my belief that the frontage is not of a quality that we should be aiming for in the high street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Members, we also have Councillor Barron this morning, who is going to speak on this and will then be leaving the room after he has spoken. So over to Councillor Barron first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just thought it was would be helpful if I give a bit of the background to it. So originally it was 7 stories, which was obviously highly contentious and got a lot of negative reaction to it. But since then, the scheme's been reduced to 3.5 stories. And I feel that in planning terms, it's very hard to argue against that height in that location. The Environment Agency originally objected to the proposals, have now removed their objection. Corky Forums were quite rightly so had concerns initially, but now they're pretty happy with the scheme. They are still concerned about the lack of parking, but the committee's restricted by the parking SPD. Historic England have stated that overall they're happy with the proposed development. So that's about all I've got to say with it, really, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barron. So over to members. Any members wishing to kick off the debate on this one? Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, that's really a question for the office of point of clarification. Business and apartments need servicing. Can you confirm the access and egress and timing arrangements to service the apartments, but particularly the businesses? Thank you.
That's all been by the transportation, the highways team, that it can work in a safe and secure manner.
Yeah, could I have a confirmation though on the timings, because I understand there's closures in the summers that might actually affect access and egress for businesses.
We can certainly condition something that would secure timings.
Chairman, if I may, I'd like a condition on access and egress arrangements for the businesses in particular, because there is already concern amongst a number of the retailers along that high street, but particularly with reference to summer arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Any other members wishing to speak on this? Councillor Ball, followed by Councillor Bolton. Sorry, Councillor Hilliard. Sorry, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions for the officer. First of all, what is the warehouse and the parking business use currently, please?
I would have to check what it is currently. But yeah, the parking is used for what is currently on site.
So the warehouse building is used for some commercial?
Yeah.
Okay. And following on from a previous question, so I understood that no vehicle access to the actual site, but looking at the maps and whatever, it doesn't seem clear how from the high street it's going to stop people going into the existing courtyard from driving. Would there be posts or?
I think I think on one of the plans you can see the barriers on the access from the high street.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, on car parking, doesn't seem to be a lot. How far is the public parking next to this application?
I would have to look at that, but the site is within the sport zone, so realistically, in a zone like that, you'd expect people to not depend on cars. It's got the cycle parking for residents within the scheme.
Yeah, it's just okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I will say I don't think it's an interest now, but I used to own the property number 3 Grand Parade, which is part of a listed building adjacent to this proposal. And I have to say that I am really disappointed in this application and the design and what is on offer. The courtyard area is absolutely ideal to link totally through to the quay via some of the alleyways. It is ideal with the independent shops you've got along there for development of an area of artisan and craft activities with cafes and a really good open commercial type of activity which would draw people through. Filling most of the courtyard with residences is not going to attract people through other than those that actually live there. So I feel that there has been a real loss of opportunity here for revitalising the high street, despite the commercial proposals for the ground floor areas. Secondly, I don't think the design really takes note of the character and the construction materials used in that Grade 2 listed warehouse, which has some very, very significant pre-1700 materials, and using the totally modern copper and zinc and everything else is just totally, for me, out of character with the area. So I will not be supporting the application.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Councillor Rice, please.
Yes, following on from Councillor Howell's comments, are we able to get more explanation about how they have proved the viability of the courtyards? Thank you.
Sorry, Hannah.
Currently, I don't have that information to hand.
You want to come back to? Councillor Lawson.
Just a quick one, Hannah. The flats, are they for rent or sale? And if they are for sale, what assurance do we have that they won't turn into holiday homes?
I think they are for sale. I'm not sure whether we could condition something like that. If we could, I'm sure it would be.
Is it feasible to put that condition on?
Any further comments, Councillor O'Neill?
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting because I have had some retailers actually approach me. I shop regularly for particular items in this area. It is a complex one. I mean, in the general consensus seems to be that the design is acceptable and does enhance this area of the high street. And I must admit that when one walks down the high street and sees the existing area, one, particularly on this development site, is disappointed what one views. Obvious decay, obvious underinvestment, and the consensus I've received would suggest that this would actually lift the area in terms of its presentation. The complexity of what we're looking at is to some extent driven by the parking SPD, which dismisses parking. It's not a requirement of any town centre development. But there is concern amongst some that this is in danger of undermining the building of communities and the possibility of even further premises becoming holiday homes or lets or even investments. And that's certainly happening along the quay and in the surrounding area in a number of premises. But in pure planning terms, I can't see planning reasons not to support. The parking SPD, I think, is in urgent need of review. I think it is undermining communities, particularly with the intention of building communities in town centres. Infrastructure will become an increasing issue. But in terms of parking at the parking SPD, it doesn't actually work against the application in pure terms. What it does suggest is actually there needs a bigger rethink on infrastructure and parking permit. And on balance, although I have those concerns, in pure planning terms, I can't see a reason for rejecting this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Brooke, followed by Councillor Trent, please.
Fine. Just been looking at the affordable housing comments from the district valuation report, and it does suggest that it would be good if we had a review mechanism agreed for milestones to see whether at any one time, and that is that in there?
That is now in there, yeah. But that is now a condition to have an overage clause put in.
Just wanted to confirm that that was the case.
Absolutely. Councillor Trent, please.
Yeah, I have a lack of enthusiasm for what's proposed. I don't think it really does much. It does less harm than what has been mentioned, has been put forward before, but it certainly doesn't float any boats. As far as parking is concerned, it's very close to the Hill Street multi-storey car park. So whether or not an arrangement could be made to enable the people who live there to have passes for that car park if they possess a car. But my overall impression of this is that it's kind of a little bit on the half-hearted side. It doesn't really sort of float any boats in what actually is quite a crucial part of the town.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Hannah, would you like to come back?
I'd just like to state that a key visitors car park on the site.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Councillor Rice?
Yeah, are we able to condition that residents will not be able to apply for Zone A parking? Is that even possible?
Can we condition that? Yeah.
It is technically possible to do so. It would need to be a section 106 rather than a condition, I would suggest, making it more enforceable. The SPD does allow for that provision, but it would need to be based on clear rationale for why that's the case. So I think committee would need to establish what would be the harm without it being included in the planning obligation. But technically it can be done if members committee want to do that.
Hang on. Oh, yeah. I've got that down on my list.
Sorry, can you just clarify, what does that mean that you've got it down in your list?
As a possible condition if we wanted to add it
Right. Okay.
afterwards. But that would be
So we don't have to agree that now.
in a moment if
Oh,
anyone
right.
actually makes a move to grant it.
Okay.
Yeah. We have the highways guy with us, James Larson. Would you like to come in, James?
Thank you, Chairman. Just with regards to the removal of parking permit, it's not something that we normally condition, but there is an informative note suggested because it's actually up to the parking team whether they grant them or not, and obviously with developments where we suggest that kind of condition, the parking team will be mindful of that, and they will sort of consider whether it's appropriate to grant those permits. But obviously, there is parking issues around there. This is a zero parking scheme, so it's something that they will be mindful of when residents, for instance, actually request those permits from them.
Thank you, James. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, can we go back to the pictures of the parking area and the old green building and the surroundings, please?
I'll just share my screen.
The actual picture of was it Dibdon's, and the yard at the back. That's it. Thank you. Yeah, this unfortunately this is a common appearance, and it's been like this for far too long. You know, this is not a 10-minute situation. This has been there for years, and to the credit of some businesses along this area of the High Street, I mean, there's the Thai there, Flavours of Asia. There's Simply Scrumptious Sweet Shop. There's a number of others that are trading up their identity, but in the officers' report, it also highlighted a number of buildings that are have architectural merit but in a consistent state of decay. And I think we actually should grasp this opportunity. I do think it's an enhancement to the High Street. Certainly, I'm sure that many visitors, if not residents, will find it attractive. And indeed, a number of shop owners have said to me that it's not ideal. It's not 100%, mainly related to parking and access requirements, but it is a significant improvement. And if we're going to trade up this area and protect it, we need to grasp this nettle and I think support this development. Thank you.
Councillor Neil, are you making a move as such on that, Councillor?
I would move to support the development of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll actually second that firstly before I begin the rest of my remarks. I think that one thing that's been mentioned is how it seems like it's a little bit of a hesitant approach to the development, but I think we have to consider just how tight and constrained this site is, and the nature of developing any area within a conservation area. It does not lead to an all guns blazing looking toward the future approach, because obviously you then run afoul of conservation officers and things like that. So I think with this site, yes, we might have liked to see another couple of things, but we have to consider the knock-on effects of what putting in those extra things would be. I'm a little more uneasy about putting in extra parking provision conditions and things into the section 106, given that it's policy compliant without any parking. Although I do agree that looking at removing their roads to apply for the permit is probably a good idea. But I think overall the benefits of this, I think it's actually quite cleverly designed, because something brand new and very conventional and new would look out of place here, but something that wasn't at all new would also look out of place and not really improve anything that's there. I think it's quite sympathetic and well thought out. It keeps enough of the heritage there without clinging to it or damaging it. And I think that the height, one thing was one thing that worried me, but I think with the street scene on Strand Street, which is a bit of a tongue twister, where you've got 3.5 stories bordering the application site, and the fact that 3.5 stories is set back as far as it is from the high street, I think it eliminates any concerns that I had about it towering over High Street, which would have been totally undesirable. But I think with the tilted balance in favour of development and the things I've just said out there, I think that there's no planning reasons to refuse this, even though in an ideal world it might have gone a little bit further. And so, no, I will second that move from Councillor O'Neill. Thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Johnson.
Just to add for the point of clarity, we did say we would condition it with the access and egress timing arrangements, a review of to suit the High Street.
If you just give me a second to speak, Councillor O'Neill. Thank you very much. Right, so we have a move to grant this from Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Johnson. There are a few things that we need to just clarify first. Firstly, do the committee agree to adding in the overage clause that was suggested from Hannah at the beginning? This is for the affordable housing. It has been mentioned, but we just need to condition that to make sure it goes in. So would everyone be happy if that went in as a condition? Okay. There is a condition, Councillor Brooke mentioned about contaminated land around that area, or one of you did. There is a condition for a contaminated land report to be submitted prior to this. So again, that condition is in there. With regards to the timings, we can put a condition on to do with that with regards to the timings for access and egress. And I would ask Hannah to supply one of those for us. But if members are agreeable to that going in, then that can be done. I'm not overly keen on putting in a condition with regards to the permits. We heard from James Larson on what his response was to that, and he had already suggested an informative note on that. And I think that would be the way to go forward on this one, rather than go through the whole section 106 thing. At the end of the day, the parking and highways team have agreed to this. Highways have no objections. I'm sure if they were so against this, they would be putting in their own objections. So personally, I would be happy if we go along the the informative note on this one, as suggested by the highways officer. Are you happy with that, mover and second?
I'm happy as the second.
Mover? Yep. Okay, so in that case, we will move to the votes on this. No, I think that's an old one. Yeah, and also we have the addendum recommendations that were added on with the addendum, as no with phosphorus and things like that, that we have to now consider. Members all happy with that? Yep, everyone happy? Sorry, Mr. Larson, do you have a new hand up?
Yes, Chairman. So the delivery management plan, we suggested a condition which is in the raft of conditions that were added to the addendum sheet, because there was some question marks over delivery timings, because High Street is actually closed for a significant portion of the year to delivery traffic and to vehicle traffic. And so we wanted a bit more clarification on that. So there is a condition actually suggested, which is in the raft of conditions. So there's no need to add another one to that.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Larson. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
So, members, we have a move to grant this one. We'll call names individually again, as is the normal way. Councillor Borthwick. Councillor Brooke. Yes. Councillor Bull. Or Councillor Hilliard. For. Councillor Lawton. For. Councillor O'Neill. For. Councillor Rice.
Against.
Councillor Trent.
Against.
And Councillor Johnson. For. And myself, Councillor Kelsey, also for. Could I get the numbers, please?
So, Chairman, that's 7 votes for and 3 votes against.
Therefore, that application is granted in line with the officer's recommendation and also the added conditions. Thank you to the applicants for coming in and speaking this morning. We will move on to
Chair, can I just clarify, Councillor Barron was sat in the public gallery. He didn't actually need to leave the room. That was the advice of the legal officer, so just to confirm that.
Thank you, Jill. So move on now to the next item, which is item 2, which is Cynthia Road in Poole. And I would ask Mr. Hodges to prepare the screen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. And are you seeing the PowerPoint now, please?
We are. Thank you, David.
Okay. Apologies that Caroline Palmer is unavailable to present today. This is an application at the rear gardens of 29 and 31 Cynthia Road in Poole to affect sever the land and demolish existing buildings to erect 3 two-bed houses with parking. So broad location, Cynthia Road up here, you've got Ringwood Road up here and Herbert Avenue here. In terms of the character and pattern of development in the area, you'll see from some of the photos, the street's very common to lots of streets that we see in BCP, which have developed since the sort of late Victorian Edwardian period up to about the 1950s, with a variety of sizes and styles, but also has seen some infilling in recent years. And you can see there's a variety of sizes, types and dwellings in here, and notably some later infilling, which I'll draw your attention to a little more at 39 to 41. Just looking at the aerial view, you can see the lengthy back gardens of the properties, which are looking to be exploited up and developed. And then you can see the relationship to the properties to the north, which you picked up on in the report. So this is the proposed layout. The 2 existing houses will remain. The access will be formed between the 2 properties. We have 2 parking spaces each for the properties on the frontage. Their gardens retained up to here, and then turning and parking for the new properties here. We've got 6 spaces shown, which complies with the SPD, as arguably over the provision, and then the 3 properties range 1 to 2, 3 here. The properties are all of the same type and design, so they will appear all in the same way. You've got bedrooms front and rear, study, kitchen, and access doors onto the side. So this is how it appears in effect the street scene at the rear of the site, with the parking court in the front and the 3 properties arranged as shown. There's an extant permission on the site already. This was for 2 units and this was a single story only. This permission still exists and can still be implemented. It's from 2021. So we have already accepted the principle of opening up this rear space here, Chair. And also just to draw your attention to the development just a few doors down at number 39 to 41, which you can see has been implemented, and very similar form of 3 properties at the back. This one actually has lesser parking and less space between the buildings for the access as well. But you can see a very similar comparable and also similar comparable relationship with the properties to the north. So just looking at views, in the addendum, Chair, we just provided a little bit more clarity on these window-to-window distances. Just to show you the properties behind to the north, it's 12 metres to their nearest window to the boundary. I don't know if you can actually read the red lines here, but basically these back gardens are 9 metres in depth. So overall, we get to 21 metres window to window, which is very common relationship in the urban area, and will be adequate to provide enough privacy, but also provides reasonable gardens for these properties as well. And just to highlight the preserved TPO tree here, and just to confirm that this scheme has been designed to take account of the long-term retention of the tree, both during the building phase and in terms of its sort of long-term impact on the properties. And the tree officer does not object to this particular scheme. Just last couple of photos of the area. You can see the variety of building heights. Generally, everything is 2-storey, hip roofs, but you've got a variety of forms, materials. You've got some later properties that have been extended and altered, you can see from the street. And then just into the back gardens, just to show you they're very, at the moment, very long and thin gardens with some potential to open up for development. Chairman, we're conscious that we showed you this scheme number 39 to 41, which was approved, and at a point where we didn't have the added impetus of the tilted balance due to the housing land supply issues. Having looked at this particular scheme, we feel it ticks all the boxes in terms of its impact, provides additional units, small family houses in a sustainable, accessible location. And we recommend the application to you for approval with the amended recommendation as set out in the addendum sheet, referring to dealing with the phosphates issue as you saw last week. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a written statement submitted by Jeff Hoodie on behalf of residents of 39, 41 and 43 Jacqueline Road, which I will now read out. I am writing on behalf of the residents of 39, 41 and 43 Jacqueline Road. We all strongly object to this development and ask that the plans in their current form be rejected. The reasons are loss of privacy. The 3 bungalows completed some 25 years ago have benefited from a high level of privacy, with adjoining properties being a considerable distance away. There was little ability to view directly into the dwelling areas of our houses. The proposed development comprises 2-storey buildings where the first floor windows will look directly into the main living areas of our bungalows and patio areas. As an example, a number of councils have clear requirements relating to privacy protection. Wrexham Borough Council requirement for separation starts at 22 metres and allows for the situation where the development that is taller than its neighbour to extend by 2 metres for each additional storey. Basingstoke-and-Deane Planning Guide indicates for new housing developments, they should ensure that the privacy of both new and neighbouring dwellings is protected, and the best way of ensuring privacy for new and existing housing is to ensure that windows do not look onto private areas. It also highlights that conditions such as requiring the use of obscure glazing with restricted opening should be considered. Cannock Chase and South Gloucestershire Council have a similar SPD set of standards. These properties have already had their plots severed to provide our bungalows in Jacqueline Road, and this development needs to be seen as overdevelopment of the current site. The 2-storey nature and close proximity to adjoining properties makes this development over-dominating to the surrounding bungalows. Policy PP 27 and 28. This development does not reflect or enhance the local pattern of development, and in fact creates its own building line sat amongst other large back gardens and in close proximity to lower level bungalows. This policy also refers to protection of trees, section B, but it has led to the loss of a mature silver birch tree. The tree was felled on the 14th of June. Storm damaged was the reason given. The arboreal report, dated the 26th of April 2022, makes no mention of damage, and we do not recall any storms between that date and 14th of June, a period of 6 weeks in the early summer, that would have caused such damage. This appears to be an excuse to fell the tree to make space for the development. And parking spaces. All the parking spaces appear to be the same size. Some of these spaces appear to be adjacent to a wall, in which case the requirement is that their additional space is added. Next, on behalf of the applicant, Neil McKeon is here, and if you could come to the table. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members. My name is Neil McKeown from Pure Town Planning, and I'm speaking in support of the application on behalf of the applicant BH Living Limited. And I just wanted to outline some kind of key consideration in regard to that support. So in terms of the planning principle and the planning history, as noted in the presentation, in December 21, an application was approved for a pair of semi-detached housing, which utilised the same access drive between numbers 29 and 31 Cynthia Road as before you today. A similar rear of site development and access to the rear of 39 and 41 for 3 houses was also approved in 2019 in December. Severances have been secured on Cynthia Road and the surrounding Rosemary Road, Faith Gardens, Natasha Gardens, in close proximity to the site in recent years for 1, 2 and 3 unit schemes. The sites were considered appropriate for redevelopment while respecting the character and appearance of the area and utilising plots within the sustainable transport corridor to target housing in sustainable locations. Considering the site location and the extant planning permission for 2 units, the principle of creating 3 under the current scheme is considered acceptable and policy compliant. Regarding character and appearance, the houses are positioned to the rear of 29 and 31, approximately 45 metres from Cynthia Road. Given the setback, the scale and the footprint of the units, the 3 dwellings will not be visually prominent in the street scene. Through consultation with the planning officer, revisions have been made to the siting of the dwellings, which in turn has ensured a suitable rear garden provision, parking layout and enhanced level of soft landscaping to the building frontages. The layout allows for 3 dwellings to sit comfortably on the site within their own plots at a similar scale to that of the approved 39 to 41 Cynthia Road schemes. Although there are plot severances in the immediate area, this particular development stands on its own merits and delivers a scheme which preserves the character and appearance of Cynthia Road. In respect to living conditions and amenity impacts, the rear elevations of the dwellings are positioned 21 to 22 metres from the rear bungalow properties at 41 and 43 Jacqueline Road. Each dwelling has a first floor rear bedroom window, and given the gaps to the bungalows to the northern boundary, the privacy and amenity of both neighbours and future occupants will be safeguarded. Similarly, the spacing combined with the modest scale of development ensures the units will not create excessive overbearing or dominant presence. Given the design and window positioning, the proposal will not create detrimental overlooking between these properties to Jacqueline Road or that of 29 and 31 Cynthia Road, which are between 25 and 28 metres away to the southern boundary. In regards to parking and access, following a revision to the site plan through negotiation with officers, the Highway Authority raised no objection. The existing dwellings to the site frontage will be served by 2 spaces each. This form of frontage parking is commonplace in Cynthia Road. The 3 dwellings to the rear will be served by 2 spaces each, with EV charging points and cycle provision secured, which are compliant with the parking SPD. The rear layout allows for suitable turning space for all vehicles to enter and exit the site in forward gear. In regards to trees and ecology, the application is supported by a tree survey and arboricultural impact assessment. Followed agreed revisions to the site plan, this was reflected in an updated tree report, which did include reference to that removal of the birch to the rear. The tree officer has accepted these revisions. The revisions take the footprint of development further away from the neighbouring trees at T1 and T5, and also removes the previously proposed parking spaces underneath the canopy to T1, thereby increasing the amount of soft landscaping and improving the relationship to these surrounding trees. An ecological impact assessment was also submitted, which environmental services have accepted, along with the recommendation for biodiversity enhancements. In conclusion, the proposed scheme delivers 3 new residential units in a highly sustainable location, which the Council have earmarked for development in order to meet housing targets. Ongoing dialogue and consultation has taken place with the planning officer throughout the process in order to comply with planning policy and secure support. And the applicant would pass on their thanks for that consultation with the officer throughout. The proposal before you has been recommended for approval by respective highways, waste collection, arboricultural, biodiversity and planning officers, and the resulting scheme utilises the site for residential development while safeguarding neighbouring privacy, amenity and the character and appearance of Cynthia Road. With this in mind and the full support of officers, I would ask you to take this into consideration this morning and offer your own support. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. We have Ward Councillor with us this morning, Councillor Millio. Millie, would you like to speak now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm assuming you can hear me okay.
No, Millie, you're very, very quiet. You need to get your microphone a bit closer if you can.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's much better.
Plugging my microphone. I'm assuming you can hear me okay.
Absolutely perfectly now. Thank you, Millie.
Lovely.
Okay, so in Newtown and Heatherlands, garden plot infill development is common, but every once in a while there's an application submitted that oversteps the planning policy and sort of represents overdevelopment of these sites. Although a similar development exists several gardens down, there are some really key differences that make this application incompatible with the local plan. And one of these differences that concerns me the most is the frontage onto Cynthia Road. So PP271A says development will be permitted, provided that where relevant, it reflects or enhances local patterns of development, specifically 5 in terms of landscaping and 6 in terms of visual impact. PP282 says plot severance will only be permitted where there is sufficient land to enable a type, scale and layout of development, including parking and usable amenity space to be accommodated in a manner which will preserve or enhance the area's residential character. Currently, the occupants of 29 and 31 Cynthia Road park down the side of their buildings, and they also have garages. To meet the parking provisions specified in the Parking Standards SPD, both the front gardens will be concreted over to provide 4 spaces to accommodate the development at the back, resulting in a loss of further natural space. Further, PP282 says the plot severance will only be permitted where there is sufficient land to enable a type, scale and layout of development, including Part 271G says development will be permitted where it provides convenient and practical parking in accordance with the relevant standards. Now, 322 and 323 of BCP Parking Standards SPD explicitly says the minimum distance expected between the end of the car or car door and a solid object is 0.5 metres. The parking provision to the front of 29 and 31 Cynthia Road is contrary to the SPD in this report because there isn't room to provide the additional space, and therefore it's also contrary to PP282 as this demonstrates insufficient land to accommodate this level of development. PP271 and PP281 both ask that the development respects the privacy of neighbouring residents. Committee members may have visited 39 and 41 Cynthia Road, which is certainly a comparable development, and they may have seen the tall vegetation belonging to the Jacqueline Road Gardens that provides good screening to maintain privacy. The level of vegetation doesn't exist currently in the boundary at 29 and 31, and despite previous versions of the plan showing significant planting along the boundary, it seems to have disappeared off the plans and replaced with the word shrubbery, which is inadequate. The officer's report says proposed boundary treatment, but I can't find any explanation as to what that treatment is, or the height, the density, or whether the planting will be used to provide that adequate screen between the properties so that they both retain their privacy. I'd also like to add, having heard Mr. Puddy's objection, that with BCP Council looking to gardens to deliver a good portion of its homes over the next 10 years, the local plan needs to be specific or a specific SPD created for garden plot development that considers distances, screening, permissible ridge heights in relation to surrounding properties and parking policies, as back garden development differs so much from roadside development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Earl. Mr. Hodges, is there anything that you would like to come back on that you've heard?
No, nothing, Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. In that case, over to members who would like to kick off on this one. Councillor Barron?
I'll kick off. The trees. So I understand that the lime tree's got a TPO. Did the birch tree have a TPO on the tree? And also, how old is the tree preservation order that is on the lime tree, please? Thank you.
David?
The lime tree is an individual TPO. It's the only tree preservation order, so the other trees aren't protected. In terms of how old T1 is as a TPO, I'd have to go off and check that. I might be able to find that out in a few minutes, but you'll have to bear with me on that one, Chairman.
Yeah, if you can come back on that, please. Thank you.
Councillor Brooke, please.
Fine, thank you, Chair. It's the question first of all, and then I'll come back later with discussion comments. Can I ask for clarification? You quote 39 to 41 as being a comparable development. Are the widths of that plot the same as the one we're looking at, or was it wider?
And Chairman, I haven't measured it. I suspect it's slightly wider, as it appears there's slightly more space. If you look at this plan, it's very slightly more space between the sides of the dwellings here, but it would be very difficult to suggest that there was a substantial difference. I think there's slightly more space to the sides, if you see there. Does that help clarify?
Yes.
Councillor Trent, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I want to come back on the tree thing because it worries me that that tree was declared as storm damaged and was taken out. And unfortunately, it reminds me of something else that I've been sort of dealing with, where a tree was taken out as diseased. Just happened to be the only significant tree in an area of woodland that's no longer an area of woodland. And I'm wondering whether we are being strict enough on our tree policy. The other thing I wanted to ask, and it's just something lingering in my mind from a long time ago, but I thought back gardens to a dwelling had a minimum length of 10 metres, and this is 9 metres. So I'm sort of wondering whether the guidance has been changed in recent years.
David?
So a couple of things. The short answer in relation to a tree which isn't protected is that there's no control for the council to prevent its removal. So we can only control the removal of trees that do have a preservation order or lie within a conservation area. So the remainder of the trees aren't protected and could be removed at any time. Notwithstanding that, the scheme sought to accommodate retention of those by the siting of the dwellings. The issue about back gardens, there's no standard in the local plan, so there's no requirement to hit a particular depth. This scheme at 9 metres would be perfectly adequate for the modest size of the dwellings, and I think we would struggle to argue any different. And just on a final point, the tree preservation order on the line appears to date from 2000, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions for the officer. What consideration is given to pedestrian access and egress to the sites? And the other one is, given that a refuse lorry probably won't get down between the two houses, how are the bin collections to be managed? Thank you.
David?
Yes, Chair. I mean, this is a very common arrangement in terms of having the access between the properties open up to a backland area. You'll see that the Highways Authority haven't objected to that, and they don't foresee there to be a conflict between a pedestrian using the route and a vehicle using the route. So we're guided by their expertise on that issue. And also in terms of, we have consulted with waste management, and again, you'll see that there's spaces shown on the layout plan for occupiers to store their bins and then present them at the roadside on collection day. That's my understanding, Chair.
Sorry, does that mean the bins will be pushed from the site out onto the pavement or the road?
Chairman, my understanding is pavement along Cynthia Road at the bottom, at the end of the site, and so it will be in line with the rest. My understanding is it's in line with the rest of the properties in terms of presenting their bins on the at the frontage of the site on bin collection day. So I don't believe it would be any different to any of the other properties in the road.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. My understanding is the bins will be grouped with the other bins at the property frontage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, please.
Yeah, would I be able to get clarification about what is the minimum parking required for this site? 6 parking spaces seems a lot. Is it is it correct that it should, the minimum required is only 3 car parking spaces, or is it less than that?
David?
Again, if you give me a couple of minutes, I can check the supplementary planning document on that and confirm that for you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Do you have any other questions on his? Okay, we're just letting him have a quick look.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the reason I was asking how old the TPO was is because if it was, 4 years ago, I was going to criticise the tree officer for not TPOing the tree at the same time. But 22 years ago, 20 years ago, the birch wouldn't have been particularly that big or that noticeable. It is regrettable it wasn't TPO, but the owner was well within their rights to remove the tree, storm damage or not, so we can't really consider that. It is a shame, but it's one that's just sort of slipped through the net, really. Regarding the parking SPD, so Councillor Earl mentioned that the spaces weren't wide enough and were in conflict with the parking. So I just wanted some clarification on that, please, because the officer actually said that they were in excess of the parking SPD. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We'll wait for Mr. Hodges to come back.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm there with the parking SPD. Oh, sorry, have I frozen?
No, you're fine.
Sorry, everything had frozen on my screen. Right, parking SPD. So, for a 2-bed property, irrespective of which zone it is, the parking requirement is 1 space. So yes, arguably there's an over provision of parking. In terms of the, I believe the issue raised by the ward member is in effect in relation to the use of these spaces on the frontage, and whether they're in effect there's sufficient space to in fact open the door and get in and out of these. Obviously, we're guided by your highways officers who've accepted this frontage arrangement shown here. But again, we are in a position whereby that requirement at the back is excessive for these properties. So in fact, there's actually spare capacity arguably within the scheme, Chairman. So I think there's a difficulty in arguing that would be a reason to refuse the whole scheme. And again, we've advised by the Highways Authority that they're happy with that arrangement.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Okay, members, any further comments? Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little bit unhappy with that with the SPD, because if the 2 at the front are allocated and not the ones at the back, surely this is the time to be sorting those things out. Whose parking spaces they are, otherwise there'll be future disputes. If they're not the right adequate size at the front, then the allocation of the excessive ones at the extra ones at the back would seem logical to be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges.
Yeah, Chair, clearly the spaces to the rear are designed to serve the new properties, and the properties at the front lie within the curtilage of 29 and 31. So we'd expect those parking spaces to go to those properties. And ultimately, we're guided, as before, by your expert advisors on highways issues, and they're satisfied with that arrangement.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Yeah, it was just to check about the cycling provision. Just noting that on observation, sort of the 6 car parking spaces in the middle of the plot are taking up almost a quarter of the whole plot, and it just seems a shame that we're allowing over provision of car parking and the space that requires, when it could be, for example, 3-bedroom homes as opposed to 2-bedroom homes, for example. But the cycle provision looks minuscule on the map. So if we could just ensure that that is actually fitting with the parking SPD, the image that is shown shows an adult bike and a children's bike. And sort of you have to be physically able to be able to get those bikes in and out of a storage like that, which is not going to be adequate for everyone, and let alone be able to get a cargo bike in there or a tricycle. So if we can just ensure that that is appropriate.
Mr. Hodges.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As per the report, the Highways Authority have signed off on that cycle provision. We're in a position where obviously we're providing houses, and should occupiers have greater needs, they do have space within their properties at the back to provide a shed for additional storage. And that would have clearly normally fall within permitted development to build a modest outbuilding within the back garden.
Thank you. Councillor Walter.
Yes, the ecology, a lot of activity with regards in making bird bricks, and then we're going on to bats themselves and breed bricks. There seems to see a lot of activity in that field. I wonder, are you happy there's enough space? Because there's no spare space there at all if you're trying to put this into force. So I just wonder how they feel about that area, and how high are the trees which are actually going to be built as well, planted, sorry.
Mr. Hodges.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. A couple of things in that. So there's an ecological assessment being done. So we've made an assessment of the importance of it. They've devised a scheme for mitigation and enhancement, which has been accepted. So we're ticking that box in terms of policy-wise. And in terms of the trees to be planted, you'll also see there's a landscaping condition where there a desire to do so. We could add any specifics that members wanted to see. For example, any tree planting in rear gardens as screening, additional screening, anything like that. And so if there was a requirement to do that, we could add that into the landscaping condition.
Thank you.
Hedgehogs. I see the hedgehogs as well.
I'm sure that's all been included in the ecological report, Councillor Borthwick. Councillor Barron, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We heard from concerned residents in Jacqueline Road regarding overlooking, and I would definitely support a condition where we put in, bleached Tulio cordatas, which are limes, basically bleached lime trees as a screen. They're not evergreen, but in the times of year, in the summer months, they would, when people are generally using their gardens, they would provide a decent level of privacy, and would, I think, would help the residents in Jacqueline Road. If we could have that condition, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hodges, would you be happy with that condition if it was so minded to be granted?
Yes, no problem. There's no reason why we couldn't require a tree planting additional in here to provide additional screening and filter some of the views through to neighbours. So if we can just clarify the species suggested by Councillor Barron, we can clearly add that into the landscaping condition. Thanks.
Councillor Barron, would you like to say that again?
Tulio cordata. Limes.
Don't ask me to spell it, Councillor Hodges.
So they, yeah, I think that'd be a good choice there.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, Chair. It's another question for clarification, if I may. Can you confirm that the hard surfacing in the front for the car parking for the existing two houses, it will be porous, and how much vegetation is going to be left? Because if it's not porous, there used to be, I don't know whether it still exists, but there used to be a requirement for at least 5 square meters of soil remaining. So could you confirm one or the other of those, please?
Mr. Hodges?
Yes, Chairman, I'm just checking the conditions because my memory was that permeable surfacing was in condition 11, all hard surfaces to be porous and to ensure no direct runoff. So yes, we can ensure permeable surfaces, and obviously that's the most preferable way to deal with those issues, to try and contain the drainage within the site itself. So in terms of the frontage, the site, that's the scheme before you, Chairman. It's largely given over to hard surfacing for the providing of the parking, and there's a pathway into number 29 here in a small area which could potentially be landscape, but that's the long and short of it in terms of the frontage of the site.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I have to say I'm always concerned when front gardens disappear under any form of hard surfacing and you lose the softened landscape that vegetation can give. So that gives me one concern. Do you want me to carry on with my other concerns while I'm here? With regard to the three new properties, I accept that they are subservient to the two original properties that are remaining, but I don't see how the two-storey buildings are subservient to the bungalows to the rear, and therefore I think there's an issue there, which obviously does bring into question the elements of overlooking, and Councillor Barron has made a valid comment, I think, with regard to that. The officer did say that it wouldn't be particularly noticeable in the street scene, but if you actually look at the photograph at the bottom, you can clearly see the garages and outbuildings there, and what we'll be looking at is at least one of the three houses directly down that driveway, and with the materials that look as if they're going to be used and the design, it is going to be significantly impacting on the space and visual appearance that you've got there. So those are my concerns and tend towards me not supporting the application, but I'm prepared to hear other arguments.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Mr. Hodges?
No, nothing further to add in respect of that, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Rice?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on the cycle parking again, and you were saying about accessibility to the back gardens. I'm not satisfied with that answer, because I'm just thinking if somebody's wanting to, if they've got a cargo bike or a tricycle that doesn't fit down those narrow alleyways, like you can't do sharp right angle turns to get into those gardens as shown on the plans. So therefore you would need it on the front where the parking is allocated and the turning space. The idea of trying to introduce a shed there to allow for cycle parking when you're compromising the car parking that's been designed could lead into sort of quite difficult discussions when actually it could be planned for very easily now. I totally agree with having additional screening that is conditioned for the back of the gardens, but I'm very concerned about the overall amount of hard standing that is being created by this design that does not need to be this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a different concern, really. I mean, I walked along this street to just get the feel of the street, or the street scene, and it was noticeable that the gaps between the houses along the street are actually quite reasonable, quite acceptable, good spacing. And yet, when I look at this, there is a density about this build that concerns me. I do have this concern that it's almost an overdevelopment based on its density, and actually it does have visually, if you look down that drive and imagine the build, it's going to have an impact on the local surroundings, and that gives me great concern. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Any further comments? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I share the concerns of the previous speakers on this one. I think that certainly regarding the backfill development, the principle's already been established by the extant scheme, and frankly, I think this is an improvement on that. I think it's a much more efficient use of the site to meet our housing targets than one rather large bungalow. Regarding the privacy, I think that the extra screening proposed is absolutely necessary, but 21 metres window to window is still a great deal of separation, and it's something that it's a distance that we as a planning committee have seen on many an occasion. I think that the frontage being hard standing is not particularly a concern, as long as it is porous, as we've already established. It's not out of keeping with the street scene, as number 33 next door is already a hard standing frontage. Regarding the visual amenity, at the moment it's not looking down onto luscious verdant gardens. You're looking at two garages that don't respect each other's building lines. I don't see how looking at a house several metres further back is a massive detriment to the street scene there. And given the fact that the principle of something, a development like this, has been established in the neighbourhood, I don't see any planning reasons to refuse this whatsoever. I think the gardens there are perfectly reasonable for properties that size. I think that the hard standing with six parking spaces may be a little excessive, but then I don't think that taking out 3 of those parking spaces would give enough room in that development to put in another dwelling, as I think 4 dwellings back there really would put a strain on the site. I think it would be an overdevelopment. So I think that's it's a sensible use to allow for an extra vehicle or 2. They're all provided with EV charging points. But I think, Chairman, there's just not enough here planning wise for us to refuse this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. I do think it is overdevelopment. I think that squeezing 3 on there is going too far for me. The other question was more of a question I had was about the ecological, the minimal provisions that are in there. Are they conditioned to be there for in perpetuity? Those conditions, do they have to be maintained? The corridor connectivity for hedgehogs, for example, does that have to remain in place? Yeah, it's exactly that.
Mr. Hodges.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the mitigation measures, its headline reports in para 60. And obviously, a number of those are actually sort of built features. So if you're putting in a bat tube into the wall, the B bricks, the corridors, those are all sort of built features. So I'm just checking the condition for implementation of those, which is yeah, so that's condition 9. If members were particularly concerned, we could just add a sentence to the end of condition 9 to say, and thereafter permanently retained.
Thank you. Yes, I would like that.
Any further comments from any members? And does anyone wish to make a move? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a move that we grant in line with the officer's recommendation, plus what's in the addendum sheet, plus Councillor Barron's screening at the rear, and Councillor Bull's wording there.
Okay.
Thank you, I'll wait for a second.
Seconder for that one. I'm happy to second that in this case. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Johnson, sorry, Mr. Hodges, you're okay with those extra conditions to be added?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. In that case, members, there being no more debate, we'll go to a vote on this one. Starting with Councillor Barron.
For.
Councillor Borthwick.
For.
Councillor Brooke.
Against.
Councillor Bull.
Against.
Councillor Hilliard.
For.
Councillor Lawton.
For.
Councillor O'Neill.
Against.
Councillor Rice.
Against.
Councillor Trent.
Against.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
And Councillor Kelsey also for. Could I get the numbers, please, Jill?
Thank you. So that was 6 votes for and 5 votes against.
So that application is granted in line with the officer's recommendation, along with the added conditions as laid out by members' requests. Thank you very much, and thank you to those that have taken the time to speak on this application today. That is the final of our applications, but before we go, I just need to run something past members concerning the next planning board scheduled for later October. Mr. Ferrens, did you want to go through this, or do you want me to do it? I'm happy. Yep, I'm happy. Members, back in Bournemouth days, we used to have a thing, pre-apps, where some applications would come to the planning board before they actually came in as applications. And I always found it worked very, very well, and it gave members of the planning board the opportunity to see what people were wishing to bring to the planning board at a future date. It's not a place for us to debate the planning applications, to make any noticeable comments about them, but it's merely an opportunity for the applicants to lay out in front of us what their suggested plans may be. And with your agreement, I'm planning to allow one of these to happen at the next planning board meeting, but it is something I feel that the members of the planning board should have a say on if they're happy for us to go that. It's not a case of us questioning the applications or questioning the applicants on anything. It's merely an informative item for us to get a bit of a heads up on what may be coming forward at future times. I personally, I'm really in favour. They worked really, really well before. But do any members have any comments about not wanting to do this? Councillor Rice?
So we're not allowed to ask any questions?
No. You can make comments, but it's not a question in time.
We can make comments?
You can make
comments.
comments.
We just don't get any answers.
What you have to do is bear in mind that you cannot overcommit yourself to being predetermined for when it does come back, but you can make comments, yeah. What we normally have is about a 20-minute presentation, then a 10-minute sort of question time or, comment time, yeah. Okay. Councillor O'Neill?
Are these, is this proposal tending to deal with the items that will come from an application because they have a degree of complexity?
No, not necessarily. It's merely
What's the rationale? Why do it? What's the rationale?
because the opportunity for the applicants to do it is there. It's an opportunity for them to lay out their plans in front of us, to say this is what we may be minded to do. This may be the application that we put in, and for them to get a bit of feedback from us as to whether they should do it. It's worked really well before.
This is also on top of the applying through the officer.
They would still need to go through a full planning application and everything once they've done this is not the pre-app for the officers. This is just for us as members.
If we have a particular aspect that we doubt, does that mean that
it can be raised?
We can still ask a question as to the why, the how, etc. Okay, thank you.
You just have to be very mindful as to how you're addressing these.
Sure.
Things.
Sure,
but
I understand.
I do think it's a really good opportunity for people to see things. Mike.
We used to have something similar in Poole, but it was a separate body, and it did work well. And it was we started with a similar thing in this council, and it just seemed to die
away, didn't it?
So yes, it is very, very useful. But you're right; you do have to be very careful if you're on the committee, not to commit yourself to anything.
My idea would be to open these up to all members. So when we're going to have one, it's not going to be every planning board, but I think it's something that all members of the council should be invited along, either on Teams to join in, so they can see it in case it affects their wards or anything. So I think it's a way of engaging with the members as well a bit further. Councillor Balter.
Yes, sir. Well, I think our times, now we're a full BCP council, we have quite a large agenda, so we've got to be very careful.
Absolutely.
Adding extra time to that, not only for us, but for the officers as well.
Yep.
It's a very difficult situation because you could find yourself quite easy lose an hour.
No,
everybody wants.
As I said just now, they're
timed.
timed. It's timed. It'll be a strict time limit on it.
Okay.
Okay. Tony. Oh, okay. Felicity.
I was just wondering how you're going to prioritise who gets this special 40 minutes with the planning committee.
This will be down to the officers for them. If an applicant says we would like to do a pre-app, then the officers will decide whether it's going to be one that comes forward. It's not going to be something that I'm going to choose.
Any applicant can ask for.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all happy that we do that, Councillor Hilliard?
No, I'm not happy about it because, as Mike said, there was a separate body, separate to the planning committee members, who could ask whatever. It's just such a fine line. I don't tend to go to public consultations or whatever because you get drawn and it's that balance which I don't like.
Okay, that's fine. Right. Yeah, the same as parents.
Yeah, just to reassure, we'll, as part of the proposal, we'll come forward with specific guidance around how it should operate, which will work with democratic services just to set out before we do it. This is how it's going to operate. It's very much an information session and how members can raise issues through that process. So it'll be set out quite clearly, and hopefully shouldn't, it should be a good thing in terms of community engagement and just understanding what's coming forward. So we will set out the process very clearly before it happens.
I'm sure. And for how speaking will take place, etc. I can rely on him to do that for us. Councillor Will? Yeah, please do.
I know you were quite keen on reinstating the weekly plans we used to get from the form. Is that happening?
I'm actively trying to sort this out at the moment. Yeah, well, there's various sort of resource and technical issues that we're trying to address those. So the idea is we do bring them back.
Yeah, we're still getting the Christchurch ones.
Yeah, it's inconsistent. We're aware of that. We want to harmonise it for everybody across the piece, and we'll reinstate it as soon as we can. So we're working on it.
Good. Yep. Okay. Yep. Close the meeting.